I'm not the biggest fan of Tim Ryan, and I know a lot of you guys aren't either. He ran for president. He got about negative 76% in the polls. Nobody really liked him. His campaign was a mess. He was flailing. But every now and then, he has some moments. This is one of those moments. This went viral. By the way, people are speculating he probably did this because he plans on running for the Senate. I think that's probably true. I get the sense he wants to run for the Senate. And he's trying to, get some attention here. But here he is on the floor of the House. He's talking about the PRO Act, which is a pro-union piece of legislation. And look at what he says to the right.
Mr. Speaker, one of the earlier speakers said, this is the most dramatic change in labor law in 80 years. And I say, thank God. In the late 70s, a CEO made 35 times the worker. Today, it's 300 to 400 times the worker. And our friends on the other side running around with their hair on fire. Heaven forbid we pass something that's going to help the damn workers in the United States of America. Heaven forbid we tilt the balance that has been going in the wrong direction for 50 years. We talk about pensions, you complain. We talk about the minimum wage increase, you complain. We talk about giving them the right to organize, you complain. But if we were passing a tax cut here, you'd be all getting in line to vote yes for it. Now stop talking about Dr. Seuss and start working with us on behalf of the American workers. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlemen.
So listen, that video was good. That video was good. He was yelling. I don't know how many of you remember this, but he attacked Bernie Sanders in the primary and said to him, hey, Bernie, you don't have to yell. Condescending, pedantic garbage. Trying to say, oh, look at the unhinged old man over here. Ha ha ha, what a joke. Bernie, you don't have to yell. And here's Tim Ryan yelling. And here's Tim Ryan going viral as a result of him yelling. Man, I hate politicians. I really do. Politicians are garbage, trash, disgusting hypocrites. It's just such deep, profound hypocrisy. And he's not going to even think about it for a second. It's not even going to occur to him that he did the, you don't have to yell shtick to Bernie. God, he's so obnoxious. Anyway, listen, on the substance of what he's saying here, yeah, of course. Republicans, certainly conservative media, they are going all in on culture war nonsense. And funny enough, they talk about it way more than the Democrats do. They insist as they talk about it, it's not us, it's the Democrats. The Democrats are bringing up this culture war stuff. No, they're not. So the biggest one is the Dr. Seuss thing that happened recently. Dr. Seuss Enterprises pulled 6 of their roughly 40 books. The private company decided. Democrats in Washington, D.C. had Dickie McGee's act to do with any of it. None of them talked about any of it. Dr. Seuss Enterprises made the decision on their own. And then Fox News and One American News Network and Newsmax were covering it on, oh my God, the Democrats are, look at what they're even canceling Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss is canceling Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss Enterprises made the decision. And by the way, it was hilarious when Republicans tried to own them by buying those books in bulk. Hey, idiots, you're rewarding the same people who made the decision to take those 6 books away. What are you doing? God, they're so dumb. But listen, there's a reason why the Republicans only are talking about the culture war, because that's all they got. That's all they got. The entire conversation now in Washington, D.C. is what? The $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill. All the Republicans are against it, even though the fucking thing polls at over 70%. Even 59% of Republicans are in favor of it. The voters. So they don't want to talk about that. Not a single Republican in the Senate voted for the $15 minimum wage, which polls at 67% in the country. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about the fact that the vaccines were now moved up to May. They say by late May, everybody's going to have the ability to get a vaccine. Now, is that true? I don't know, but that's what they're saying, and the production is really ramped up under the Biden administration. They don't want to talk about that. Every single one of those things makes them look like the abject failures that they are. Now, I'm not saying the Democrats are good. They're not. They're also corrupt, incredibly corporate. But the Republicans are abysmal across the board in D.C. All of them in D.C. are too far gone. All of them. So they can't talk about substantive stuff. So what else do you want to talk about? Oh, I don't know. Let's talk about Dr. Seuss 24/7. Let's talk about Mr. Potato Head 24/7. Let's talk about Pepe Le Pew and Speedy Gonzalez 24/7. That's all they got. So what does Tim Ryan do? He goes out there and he says, shut the fuck up about Dr. Seuss and work on the PRO Act with us. Okay, so what's the PRO Act? He's talking about this is a pro-union piece of legislation. And what it does is it classifies independent contractors, or gig workers as they're called. It reclassifies them as employees. Why? Because when you're employees, you have certain labor rights and protections. When you're an independent contractor or a gig worker, you don't. So it reclassifies. It's all a scam. The independent contractor thing, the gig worker thing, it's a scam. There is no, it just makes it so that labor laws don't protect you, basically. So this bill says, no, you're all employees now. It also really kills those right-to-work laws, which are anti-union legislation in a lot of the conservative states. And really the way to think about a right-to-work law is it's a right to work for less. Because people in right-to-work states, anti-union jobs, they end up making less than their counterparts in pro-union states, and I believe it's over $1,000 a year. A lot more benefits and more money. So it kills the right-to-work laws, and then it also bans company-enforced anti-union propaganda. When you're considering unionizing, oftentimes management sits you down and shows you some, video or PowerPoint presentation about how unions are so terrible, and so it bans those misleading events from happening. So it's a good piece of legislation, and thankfully it did just pass the House. Only one Democrat opposed it, Henry Cuellar, however you say it. Jessica Cisneros almost beat him in the election there last time. So he's the only Democrat who voted against it. Every other Democrat was for it, and even 5 Republicans crossed the aisle to vote for it. So that means the overwhelming majority of the Republicans were against this piece of legislation. So the point of Tim Ryan is, shut the fuck up about Dr. Seuss. None of us are even talking about Dr. Seuss. None of us did anything about Dr. Seuss. All you have is culture war garbage. Do something for workers. And guess what? The PRO Act is a piece of legislation that unquestionably would help workers. It's not a coincidence, guys, that at the time in the U.S. that we had the golden age of economic expansion, unionization rates were the highest they ever were. There's a direct correlation between how many people are in unions and how strong the middle class is. Not a coincidence. Not a coincidence. So we got to get back to that time. So on the substance of it, Tim Ryan's 100% correct. All the conservatives have is the culture war right now. And you need to understand they're diverting you. It's obfuscation. It's deflection. They're trying to take your attention and divert it elsewhere so that you don't realize how none of them are for raising the minimum wage. You don't realize how none of them were for the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill. They have nothing of substance to add on the economy. And so they only talk about social issues and, by the way, insist that the Democrats have positions that they don't have.